It's episode 13 of Interrupted by Matt Jones, presented by Cornbread Hemp. This is The Good Life. We have done the last couple weeks, probably more politics and current events than some of you like. So I thought we'd do some basketball because there is nobody who's writing on college basketball I respect more than this fellas from CBSSports.com, Matt Norlander. Matt and I was just telling the guys here a minute ago that you and I worked together for a year in 2011 at CBS Sports, and you've been there ever since. Thank you very much for your time.
It's good to be with you. Yes, yes, indeed. That first season I came on. We don't need to totally walk down memory lane, but yes, I was hired the first week of December of 2010 at CBS Sports. And you were, I think you had like freelance for CBS previous to that, but you were number two after that. Eric Angevine and then Jeff Borzello.
Eric Angevine. I was just trying to remember who the other one was. Eric Angevine. That's right.
Angevine, who previously ran Storming the Floor. Any hardcore college basketball.
What does he do now?
Really, you know what? I don't know. I haven't talked to Eric in a number of years, but he under good terms just willingly opted to
move to a different life. Yeah,
media business. Yeah, over a decade ago. But we were the original four, and I've managed to somehow cling on here for.
Well, I know how you've managed, which is that you do an amazing job, and so I wanted to have you on to talk a number of things. The most important stuff is probably the most boring, so I'm going to save it. So let's start with the most fun things. Here in Kentucky, we had an amazing story last year with John Calipari taking the Arkansas job, Mark Pope getting the Kentucky job. I think sometimes we are so wrapped up in it here, we don't necessarily get the perspective. Tell me when you first heard John Calipari is going to Arkansas. What did you think of that?
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Again, we don't have to totally relive this as well, but this is one of the more – I don't know if I technically broke the story, but I felt like I was going to be the one that broke the story when it happened because I got told this is the Sunday before the title game.
Yes. That
morning I got a tip on it. And then, or maybe it was like late morning, early afternoon. I can't remember all the particulars in terms of when I first learned. But I think someone in Arkansas said, "Hey, I didn't know this in real time, but like the day after everything was starting to settle, because I was working under the guys that I was going to break this story. I think someone in Arkansas said, "Hey, I'm hearing Cal might be actually involved in Arkansas." Anyway, I remember that story. That's such a gargantuan story and such a significant tip. Thinking like, nah, I'll sniff this out, but I have my real doubts about this.
Yeah.
The timing of it, it's the same league. Would he actually really go through with this? Everything that he had talked about with Barnhart previously and all that. And then lo and behold, it was true. I remember going, I actually had like a CBS team dinner and I confirmed it with a third source go right before we left for dinner in Arizona. I didn't know that Cal was in Arizona.
Yeah, he was there. Point. He was there. Yeah,
I didn't know he was still there at that point. And this was later. So this was So anyway, I was like, okay, here goes nothing. Let's put it out. I never sat down at the dinner table.
Well, walk me through that for a second, Matt, because a lot of people wouldn't know this. I mean, when you get a scoop of whatever it is, let's say it's that or whatever it is, how much verification do you feel like you have to go? I mean, you always hear this, you got to have two sources, but like today's social media world, things move so quick. Yeah. How do you feel like, how much proof do you feel like you need to go with something?
A lot. I actually feel like I hold myself to an extremely rigorous standard, and that winds up
burning you sometimes.
Totally fine with. Yeah, I sometimes like I will have stuff for any number of time. Could be hours, could be days, and it might be single sourced, and I just won't go with it, and someone else will go with it. I don't want to be wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And
have you ever been wrong? I don't remember you being wrong.
Honestly, like there's probably been a couple of times where I've reported something and it's been 90% right, but there might be a little bit of the framing that winds up not being the way. But you want to be careful, like when you report these things and framing, and obviously when like a high profile coach is considering changing jobs, you know, you also have to allow for it shy of literally the coach in question, the agent, or the athletic director. Those are like the three people. And in rare cases, and this usually is not the case for me, the president of a university, like those are the four people that you would need to rely on to essentially not be wrong. Like even secondary, and this isn't what happened with the Calipari situation, obviously, but even in a situation where a coach might change a job and his most trusted assistant or someone that's extremely close to them tells you like this is where it's going to go, the human being involved still has the capacity to say no. I remember I had the Jay Wright retirement. 4 hours walking around my house telling my wife this is going to happen, but Jay Wright technically has the capacity at the very last moment before, because his team didn't know, to tell his team, you know what, until 10 minutes ago I was thinking about this, I'm going to retire, but now that I'm in this room, like you have to allow for the possibility that these things might go a different way. So anyway, I try and hold it to a pretty rigorous standard. And I think when the Calipari stuff broke, and man, that is one of the more true, like from a reporting standpoint, truly surreal. I think we went live with a podcast reaction on the Arizona time, like at 12:30 at night, just completely wild. I think my framing was John Calipari has entered into serious discussions about leaving Kentucky for the Arkansas job. And that was also, not to totally relive all of this stuff, but I remember a very interesting hiccup with a lot of that was it was in Cal's contract that he could not engage with another school about a job, and as far as I can tell, he technically broke the terms of that contract. Now, whether privately,
he did break it, and I think it was. Break the terms of the think it was probably. Well, from my perspective, and I think he then had some second thoughts, and I think the fact that he broke it gave Kentucky some leverage that the result that was probably best for anybody ended up happening because of that. I mean, I think that this is one of those circumstances where I think everybody won. I think Arkansas won. I think Cal won. I think Kentucky won in the sense that it was probably time for it to go. I know you're not here on a day-to-day basis, but did you kind of feel like, as you've been around, a lot of people at Kentucky. I mean, did you kind of feel like, look, this probably better for everybody if everybody just kind of goes in a different direction?
Yes. I remember when they lost to Oakland, tweeting like, there's a real chance John Calipari just coached his last game ever at Kentucky, because in the immediacy of that, it was like, okay, we cannot do again. I live in Connecticut. I'm very familiar with Kentucky. The 96 Kentucky team is my favorite team ever. As a teenager, Kentucky was the team I was most drawn to. I could legitimately say that I was a fan of Kentucky as I grew up in Vermont, just because I love the way Pitino's teams played. Like Tony Delk was my favorite college player of the 90s and all that stuff. So I have I lived in Louisville when I was much younger, never lived in Lexington, but have a general idea of some of it, as much as you can when you're not actually on the ground there and living it day to day. And I remember when the Oakland loss happening and just scanning all this stuff as a part of the gig, being like, they can't keep doing this. Like this has to be a reason for change. And then nothing happens. They do that awkward television.
Oh, it was the worst interview ever. Yeah.
Which seemed to run counter to some of the stuff that I was being told. I can't believe all in this. Whatever. We can keep it moving here in a second. But then you get to the point where, it's like, all right, Calipari, Arkansas, I'm told this is going to happen. And then it winds up happening, and crazy. There's only one other coaching, at least in the past 15 years, only one other coaching thing that's happened surrounding the Final Four that seemed to for at least a little bit take away from the spotlight. And that's when Roy Williams retired on April 1st in the bubble tournament. And that was a situation where a lot of people in the industry just had to be like, hey, is this an April Fool's joke? Is he actually retiring?
True. Yeah.
It's Roy Williams. I think they lost in the first round of that tournament. He's going to end his career, not even with a win in his final year in the tournament. And it was true, but that was the Monday of the tournament, maybe, I think, in that bubble tournament. And then Calipari is just man, oh man. I just did a story at CBSSports.com.
Yeah, I want to talk about it. You did the biggest moments, right? And
I did the biggest stories, not the biggest moments. Those are two different things. But yeah, I did the biggest stories in men's college basketball specifically over the past 25 years. And Cal going to Arkansas just missed the cut. And when I say just missed the cut, it was among the 3 or 4 biggest cuts, because in my opinion, and you would, frankly, this is when I really came to understand your presence in Kentucky. Cal leaving Memphis for Kentucky was a bigger deal. It was a bigger story, had more profound impacts on the sport. So that story is in the top 25. Cal to Arkansas, also an earthquake, but I didn't want to have 2 Calipari movement stories in the rankings as well. But the Kentucky one in 2009, as I wrote and we podcasted for Eye on College Basketball on CBS, it was the first, on the basketball side at least, Cal leaving Memphis for Kentucky, and the door and the live stream and everyone waiting for Cal to walk out of that building, and Alan Cutler chasing Billy Gillespie through the halls of Kentucky. Kentucky's facility, everything there. It was the first college basketball coaching change in the Twitter era where it was dominated. I mean, you had a days-long process where it was like Gillespie's going to be out, who's going to be the guy? It's got to be Cal. When are we going to get the word? And everything that came after that, the good, bad, all of it tied to Cal, recruiting, one and done, Duke, everything. That's why that one clearly, to me, registered as among the 10 or 12 biggest stories of the past 25 years.
Yeah, I loved your list, by the way. The only thing I didn't, you didn't have the Louisville scandal, right? Was that the only?
No, okay, I didn't, and someone's actually mentioned this to me. I didn't have the Louisville scandal only because I put Pitino. There's been so many things, right? I didn't have. I did not have the Katrina Powell. I did strongly debate it. I really, really did. It was hard. Dude, there were like 45 stories I did a top 25 and one in the casino that we do. Like Gary Parrish is the top 25 and one rankings. So it was hard to get this list down. And then I included when the FBI scandal hit, Pitino lost his job, and it was like the last scandal that led to him losing his job in Louisville, getting the national championship stripped. And to me, that was the bigger Louisville story than the scandal. But you're right. I do not disagree with the fact that they're really like Louisville scandals involved in that were probably like 30 candidates for 26 spots, but I had to have like a shocking retirement. So like Jay Wright retiring, emblematic of the NIL era.
Yeah, very shocking because of the timing.
25.
Yeah.
I had to have I know this is forgotten a little bit, but Miami and Virginia Tech and Boston College leaving the Big East in the early 2000s, which set up, that was the first domino. I have other conference realignment stuff in there, but that was an extremely, extremely big deal. It basically allowed the Big East to become a 16-team basketball conference and set the template. Sorry, that's like a huge, huge story. So anyway, not to totally defend my list, but it was tough to.
No, your list is great. Your list is great. I mean, you got the one that was number one with all the NIL and the changes there. So let's talk just a second. I mean, college basketball as a sport is a completely different sport than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and there's a good chance 3 years from now it will be a different sport than it is now. It is hard to, on a day-to-day basis, keep track with what it's going to be. I did on my show today this whole legal thing about, what's it going to take. From a legal perspective, to me, the only and you tell me if you disagree with this, the only thing that's really going to lead to guardrails in any of this is if Congress passes a bill that essentially sets that law about college athletics separate from the regular law and the president signs it. I think absent that, it's still going to be chaos for the next few years. Do you agree with that?
I do. This is such an unwieldy topic, and full transparency. I don't know how long from us taping this will go live.
That's exactly. Well, it's today, so you don't have to worry about changing a lot.
So earlier this week on Monday, let's just rewind some of this here. I was on the road earlier in July, and I went to a couple of different recruiting events with Adidas and Nike, and I talked to a variety of different coaches. Okay, and this comes after the House case settlement is decided. And then just as pure coincidence, when I was on the road, the College Sports Commission, I promise I'm going to answer this, but I just want a quick setup here. It puts out the guidance that says, hey, listen, collectives essentially, they're not going to be allowable anymore. And, you're going to have to really clear a high bar for a valid business purpose for any player to get money through a collective, through NIL and endorsements and all that. Well, I'm on the road talking to coaches as this stuff comes out. So naturally, it's easy fodder for conversation and speculation and just bitch sessions, if you will. So I write a story about all of the uncertainty that comes with all of that, because you've got the revenue sharing and the caps in different schools, and we can get into all of that as well if you want. But what was so interesting to me, because I expected it maybe from one or two coaches, but this came up with, I don't know, nearly a dozen coaches. At some point in our conversations, they would just arrive at the conclusion of, just got to make these guys employees, man. Like, can we just do this already? Like, that is what gets us there. And I do think, unfortunately, this is going to take a long time. Like, I think I would love to be wrong, but I'm sorry. I've been following this story literally since 2009 in terms of the slow death of amateurism. And amateurism is dead, but you have to be able to have football players and basketball players unionize, collectively bargain, and within that then comes the constraints that all other professional leagues have. Like, in so many ways, not entirely, but in so many ways, you can see how college athletics is a professional enterprise, and we're not there. It's going to take more fighting, more lawsuits, more struggle. I don't think the executive order issued by
it does
Donald
nothing.
Trump
I do think there's a second way, though. The employee thing to me is how it should be.
Yeah.
But Congress, I do think legally could make a law that says all these antitrust laws and all the laws that we have that were violated when it was essentially amateurism. I mean, Congress could have a law that says none of that applies to college sports. They can do that.
They could, but Matt, as you know, it's actually become even, I would say in the past year, if we go back 2-3 years ago when this was a topic, it seemed as though, NIL was still figuring itself out, and it seemed like there was a real opportunity in that time, even though it's hard to get this stuff through, where Republicans and Democrats had a lot of common ground on this in terms of empowering players. And now it's frustrating for you, frustrating for me, and it's got to be so frustrating for the folks who follow college sports, follow your podcast, follow your radio show. It is just agonizing to see that now we have reached a point where this issue now has also become something of a partisan issue.
You're exactly right.
I want to be clear. There is definitely some common ground about what college players should be empowered and able to earn. But now it is becoming this thing where you've got the Democratic side that is really looking for all-out empowerment, and I don't even necessarily disagree with that whatsoever. And then you've got the Republican side that is looking to put certain barriers and guardrails around it and trying to push through some antitrust exemptions for the NCAA that still would, frankly, allow the powers that be with the NCAA to put restraints on college athletes that would
actually go backwards.
Maybe what they deserve. So it can do it, Matt. It can do it. But this current one, this SCORE Act,
it's not going to work.
I've heard from plenty of people, like, it's going to die.
It's going to die.
It's not going to get through. It's the most ambitious one yet. It's the closest one that conceivably could happen to antitrust status, and it's still not going to get through.
It's not going to happen. I mean, there's a congressman here in Kentucky named Morgan McGarvey who works on it on the House side for the Democrats. And he and I have had a lot of conversations. He wrote the bill that was the Kentucky State Bill, which is one of the very first bills that came out with this. It's not going to happen until, they got to get 60 votes in the Senate, which means you've got to have Democrats on board. I think the Trump executive order makes it worse because, now anytime Trump's involved, the Democrats don't want to give him a win and he wants to take credit. And I actually just think that makes it harder. I will say one thing about his executive order. There was some stuff in there that I do think Democrats would agree with. Like, we got to protect women's sports. We got to have 16 sports if you make there was some positives, but I'm with you. I don't think it's going to happen. Coaches are frustrated. But are we done with the era where coaches say, I'm retiring because I don't want to do this anymore? Did we finally get rid of all those people, or are there some still around?
No, we did not get rid of all those people. Now, it depends on how you want to frame and respond to that. I will say that I'm not going to give the coaches away, obviously. I talked to 2 power conference coaches, one on the road and one was just on the phone early. I want to say this was maybe June, maybe May. And they just, just talking casually and off the record saying, check back with me in March because this really might be it.
Okay.
But you've got other coaches like, one who is not there is Tom Izzo, who is as fervent and outspoken about a lot of this stuff. And at the same time, also, I caught up with Tom on the road, and some of the fights that he was putting up in really good faith, by the way, for 7-8 years, he now has realized like there are certain things that people will seek his opinion out on, and there's other stuff where he's like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't be saying the same stuff on these committee calls and on these Zooms of week after week, month after month. Like I'm gonna have to let it go. With that being said, no, I still think that you will have there's a real chance that some coaches could retire next season or the year after and cite where we're at. I don't think we're fully out of it there, but I don't think like. Couple guys that I don't think are in that realm. Like I think Izzo, 2, 3, 4 more years, and when he goes, it'll be affected by some of this, but he's also going to have naturally aged out of it. But I don't think he's coming. I don't think he's coming soon. Guys like Rick Barnes, wait and see. Although Rick Barnes says not close. I asked Dana Altman, says he's not close. Although he also hinted like it's kind of my wife's call, and that's
I don't know. To me, if they want to go. I mean, like it's like the drama of some of those guys drives me crazy. I mean, Patino's 900 years old and he's making it work. So let me ask you this.
Correct. Very much the case with Patino. Mark Few is one I would keep an eye on. Mark Few, I could see coaching for 10 more years, or if you told me he retired the day after next season, I would believe either one of those just of the way he's wired. That's all.
Let me ask you, if you were to say whatever the rules end up being in the next year or two, what programs in the NIL era, give me 3 or 4 programs you think are set up to really utilize these rules to their advantage, and maybe 3 or 4 programs that have been good that you think these rules have a chance to hurt going forward.
Okay. Schools that are set up inherently to do well. Duke, I'm not going to give you everyone. There's just a few that are off the top of my head. Duke, UConn, Kentucky, St. John's. Let me give you an even 5 here.
I love this.
And then the 5th one that I think is set up to do well, but will be fascinating, is Marquette, only because Marquette doesn't have football. It's in the Big East. It has plenty of money, but Shaka Smart just isn't going into the portal to add players. So it's actually kind of wild how Marquette's like a different deal from everyone else, because I don't think there's a program that has access to more rev share money but isn't utilizing it to maximum ends than Marquette. So they're fascinating to me. Schools that are...
Well, let me use those 5 before you go to the others. Okay. All right, so Kentucky and Duke, historically great programs, huge fan bases, Nike, donors, national programs. Makes sense to me. Yes. UConn, St. John's, Marquette. In conferences without football, they can put a lot of rev share. They don't have to share with football. That strikes me as the reason those 5 programs are on the list. Am I right?
Yes, largely speaking. Like UConn has brought most of its collective. Like I don't know if UConn can hit 20.5. It's brought most of its collectives in house, and UConn now has, as I understand it, just a lot of money, and rightfully so. I mean, men's and women's basketball there, and it does have a football program, there will be rev share money that goes to the football program, but UConn's football program is, it's kind of on an island to a certain extent there. St. John's just doesn't have to deal with that. You've got Rick Pitino. I remember one source at St. John's telling me, like, this is tongue in cheek, but it's like, we should be the evil empire. Like,
yeah, they should.
We have this. We are in New York City. Like, this should be what we are, and that's going to be reflected in the rankings in the preseason. I would estimate St. John's probably spent. There had to be a top 5 to 7 spender in the portal this past offseason. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And so they are not restricted by football. Before we get to the programs, I guess I can meld.
Well, let me ask you on the ones that have spent the most money this year.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, Kentucky, St. John's, or Michigan, those would be 3. What else is on that list?
Texas Tech, absolutely, for sure. Texas Tech is up there. BYU is up there as well. Okay. Again, just as a reminder to listeners and viewers, this is because the House case settlement didn't go into effect until this summer. So all of these schools in this past portal cycle, they front-loaded this. They got all this donor money, and so that's why they were able, in some cases, to just cruise, and I mean cruise north of $10 million and completely blow away what the market was the year before, let alone the year before that. So they were up there. Indiana was considered pretty high up there, and there's some others as well. I actually wrote a big story on that, Beck.
Yeah, I saw that. All right, so what about the bad ones?
Which stirred up a little bit, just because some coaches don't care and other coaches don't want it like out there how much they have, because they worry about like the 8th, 9th, or 10th guy on the roster being like, wait a second, we have how much?
I understand that. Yeah.
Like, that could be a thing. So it is what it is. Schools that feel like they could be affected by this, I do think it's schools like in the SEC and the Big Ten, potentially. I want to stress this. This is just potentially. We'll see. Like, now that some of the stakes of these things have changed and the College Sports Commission has eased its guidance on collectives, like, how far does that guidance go? I've heard from a few people in the industry in the past 48 hours about this, and some think it's just, this is going to go back to what it was, and then it's the rev share cap, and others think they said this, but let's actually wait and see. Let's look at the next 4 or 5 months, and let's just see if we have a couple high-profile stories where players might try and get deals and they actually still do get shut down because they're trying to get $500,000 through a collective. So there is some practicality there, but I'm wondering about schools like Auburn, Alabama, who else in the SEC? I was told Arkansas from a rev share standpoint is not, like, Kentucky is the exception. I thought that Arkansas could be near that. I know we have actually had. We'll give a little more meat to your viewers.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a minute. The Kentucky.
All right, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I have a little bit more on that. But like some schools in the SEC that could be affected by it. I also think the Big Ten is another league where,
like Ohio State,
football dominated. It's football dominated. So schools that have had some benefits here recently that I wonder about. Izzo even told me his ref share for this year was 3.5. He hopes that to be higher. I wonder on Maryland. Purdue seems to be a good spot. UCLA, I'm curious on. Illinois has definitely had a lot of money, more than $10 million to play with. What will they be over the next 2 or 3 years? They might continue to still be in a good spot there. And then it's the other schools that aren't typically, like you wouldn't think to be high earners, but like a Kansas State had a ton of money last cycle. They weren't good. They didn't make the tournament. You had a few of those instances where schools that brought in a lot of money didn't wind up paying off. And North Carolina is another one to look out for.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about North Carolina for a second, because North Carolina is the blue blood now that is feeling less and less like a blue blood every day. And it seems to me the easiest sell in sports should be North Carolina. Awesome school, Michael Jordan, huge fan base. What are they not set up for the future? And why does it feel like they are becoming mediocre? They're becoming Indiana before our eyes.
Man, I was sitting with a coach at the Nike event, and I was just saying, listen, man, I've never coached in college basketball, but if you told me that I could have any job in the sport, I would pick North Carolina.
I don't disagree.
Because you have a fan base that is super smart, really invested, but as you and I both know, like Kentucky is on a different level of passion and intensity, and North Carolina is like the school of Jordan. You're involved in the greatest rivalry. You've got all this history, more Final Fours than any school ever. Like, to me, it's just as good of a job out there. It's, I put it one notch above your Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, go on down the list there. But it's a very interesting time. So I hear what you're saying about the Indiana stuff. I think that's too harsh.
Okay. Well, it is, because they went to the finals just a couple of years ago. So
they did go to the finals just a couple of years ago. They were a 1 seed. But they didn't make it to the Final Four, but they were a 1 seed. Hubert Davis is entering next season on the hot seat. I wrote about North Carolina and just in general, big picture with North Carolina in December after Belichick was hired. They lost on AJ Dubbanza because they lost out on the bidding war there. Dubbanza is going to play at BYU. But North Carolina is super fascinating for this angle, Matt. This upcoming season. So the donors, some of the most important donors around North Carolina, it's not that they turned their back on the basketball program, but they were giving more attention and money to football than ever before. And this was reinforced to me by a couple of people in that around Chapel Hill with North Carolina, like even though Bill Belichick is now there, and yes, we saw the photos from Media Day earlier this week where he's just, it's what you would expect, just an army of cameras and reporters, right? For the people that support the University of North Carolina, again, this is not my opinion. This is the opinion shared by people both at the university and support the school. Like, the football program doesn't even come close to touching the basketball program. Mm-hmm. I guess you would understand the parallels.
No,
there
it's Kentucky. I mean, Calipari had an issue, and I wonder if other schools have this, where I think he was happy football was good. But once money starts coming into it, then these coaches are competing for donor money. Yes. And I do wonder at a place like North Carolina, when you bring in a Belichick, like, there's got to be some resentment from the football and basketball pro. It certainly happened at Kentucky in the Cal years.
That was quite obvious. There was definitely some consternation and unease. So what's interesting about North Carolina is you say, like, okay, they feel like they're a blue blood that's really fading and struggling. On some level, that's true. But what is undeniable is that somehow, some way, that university and that athletic department on the football side, we're talking north of 40, maybe $50 million invested when you include contracts and player and all that stuff. And then the basketball program was able to jump north of 10 million after, I believe last season, I believe it was under 4, and now it was above 10 for this upcoming season. So they have invested. They have given Hubert Davis, who now has a general manager and basically like a mini front office, a staff of 3 or 4 people that are tasked with building out a roster. I actually think it might be a too many cooks in the kitchen situation, but Hubert Davis is unquestionably going into a hot seat season, needs to make the tournament with ease to keep his job. There was a lot of talk last season about how he should have been fired, period. But I think when you look at UNC, even though it has been up and down a little bit of this, I think on balance, overall, you can't fire Hubert Davis just yet. There is the other case, though, that my co-host Gary Parrish said it on our podcast. He said, if you're at North Carolina and you look at what's happened so far and you look forward to the next 5 years, do you have the right coach? And if you want to say the answer is no, then you
Then
could
what are
make
you
the case,
doing?
okay, then go find the coach. Like, don't go through this for another year. But that's not what happened. They're going to go through it for another year, and the athletic department there has all of this money invested into football and men's basketball. If you combined it all and you got the true number and you told me it was north of $65 million, I would completely believe that number.
That's amazing.
And there is no guarantee that either coach, Belichick or Hubert Davis, will be the head coach at either of those programs 1 year from where we speak today. Huge stuff upcoming for UNC. By the way, I know there was I'm not super dialed in on the timeline with all this stuff, but I know like there's something got aggregated about UNC looking to join the SEC or looking into it. That's a non-story. I did report on this as well in December. This is one of many different aspects, but hiring Belichick for some donors at North Carolina comes with the idea of, hey, if we get Belichick, we become relevant, we're good in the ACC, and we up our value over the next 3-4 years, then maybe when it gets time to redo a lot of these media deals, and at the end of the decade, maybe we actually will have the validation if we want to explore to get into the SEC. Like, that's a big bargaining chip for us. So there is truth to that, but there's not even remotely anything close to immediate on it, let alone the SEC having genuine interest. So I know that kind of got some run this week, but I wanted to add at least a little.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'm a big advocate of having North Carolina in the SEC, but now I don't have to get my hopes up. Let me ask you a big picture college basketball question. One thing you and I share is we both love college basketball. I mean, I have a real affinity for people for whom college basketball is their favorite thing because it's been that way my entire life. I take a general view that, yes, it's chaotic. Yes, it feels sometimes like the train's off the tracks. But that in general, college basketball is in a much better place today than it was 5 years ago, 8 years ago. That with people staying in school longer, the quality of play is better. I think the interest is a little higher. And I actually think college basketball, NIL, has oddly been helpful. Maybe in a way it hasn't for college football. I actually think college basketball is in a decent spot right now. Do you agree with that?
I do agree. Now, I will preface this by saying I'm also someone who, just as a function of loving the sport, like really just try and have my coverage of it reflect the genuine enthusiasm that I have for it, while also giving plenty of room for criticism and skepticism where it does apply. If we had had this conversation in 2018, I would have acknowledged that there were some issues, but I still love the sport. But I do think that what you just said is accurate. In 2025, the sport of college basketball is better than it was, say, in 2017. This upcoming season, we will have, and we're coming off of just having had Cooper Flagg. I actually think the one and done conversation that has existed for almost 20 years at this point has been long misguided. You would rather have 1 year of these superstars and not have them at all.
Totally agree.
The era of 3 or 4 year players, while it does happen every so often, you'll get like we're going to have it this year. Braden Smith is a recognizable 4-year player. He's going to be a preseason first-team All-American. He's coming back to college basketball. You still have that, but you'd rather have 1 year of Cooper Flagg, 1 year of Zion Williamson, go on down the list with all those players. But you are having more players stay. So you'll have Braden Smith back. JT Toppin got more than $4 million in NIL to return. He would have probably been a first-round pick, didn't even entertain it to return and be arguably the preseason player of the year. He's a recognizable player. Obviously, Braden Smith, I mentioned him. Other All-Americans that will return this year. I'm trying to see who else might be. PJ Haggerty was an All-American last season. He's on a different team, but he's coming back.
But there's even value in an Otega Owe coming back to Kentucky.
Yes,
like, it gives something for fans. What I like about the system now is there's a good contrast. You had the Duke one and dones playing against a Houston team with a lot of people that have been there, and that contrast just sets up for good dichotomy in a game, and I think fans like that.
I agree with you. So I'm going to pull right now. Let me pull right. I don't do every October. I rank the top 101 teams allegedly, purportedly, for the upcoming season in men's college basketball. But I'd really start digging in on that in September, and then we always publish it every October. I say that to say, my buddy Gary Parrish, he does every time there's a significant transaction on the portal wire, he updates his off-season top 25 and 1 ranking. So I'm just going to really quickly read you, and the last update was in June, so there hasn't obviously been roster movement since then. But real quick, the top 10 according to him heading into next season, just to bolster your point, Matt, and what we've got here. Now he's got St. John's at number 1, which I appreciate because St. John's probably won't be the number 1 preseason team, but it's going to be a preseason top 5 team. That's a lock. You've got Rick Pitino. He's as recognizable as any person in college basketball, period, in St. John's, and the revitalization of that program based in
It's awesome for the sport.
That's awesome. That's great for college basketball.
Yes.
You got Houston, number 2. Houston has been the number some people may not realize this. The University of Houston, under Kelvin Sampson, the past 4 years has finished number 2 at Ken Pom and has essentially been a top 3 program over the past half decade in college basketball. We saw what happened. It's coming off a brutal national championship game loss. It will still be awesome yet again. Will probably be the preseason number 1 team in the AP poll. That's number 2. He's got BYU number 3. AJ DeBansa might be the number 1 pick in the next year's draft at worst, unless, knock on wood, barring injury. Like, he has really no excuse not to fall below like number 3 or number 4. It's different. Variety is good. BYU, that's going to be a point of intrigue for a lot of fans that may not be dialed in the summer, and then you get to October, November, gearing up for college hoops. What the heck's BYU doing here? In the preseason?
And the money they're spending, it'll be interesting.
Huge money, right? Huge money there. Purdue is number 4. They've, that's a massive, massive fan base in the Big Ten. We saw they almost won a championship. You got UConn number 5, Dan Hurley, face of the sport. I've maintained you can love him, you can hate him, whatever. Having Dan Hurley in college basketball is a net positive to the sport. I will not hear arguments otherwise. You can hate what he does or how he reacts on the sideline. It is way better for college basketball to have a Dan Hurley than
what I call him, Matt. It's the same thing in some ways Cal was in his prime at Kentucky. He's a PTI coach, meaning he will give them things that PTI will talk about in their first segment. And college basketball needs people like that, and we don't have a lot. He's one of those.
Correct. And unquestionably, number 6 is Florida. Just as an example, Florida coming off a national championship, reloaded in the SEC, going to be a preseason top 10 team. Unquestionably, Todd Golden, not necessarily a PTI coach, but a smart young coach. And you've got a national champion coming back in this era of high transactions, and yet the Gators, I think, unquestionably deserve preseason top 10 status. Texas Tech is number 7, a ton of money there. JT Toppin, preseason All-American. Michigan, number 8. Anytime Michigan is involved in any preseason poll in any sport, that's a big-time thing. Dusty May made the Final Four, considered one of the, he's too far now to be an up-and-comer, but you know what I'm saying with that. Very recognizable. Duke is 9. Sorry, Kentucky is not in the preseason top 10, by the way.
How is Kentucky not in the top 10? I thought you were going to say Kentucky 10.
I'll get to that in a second. Okay. He's got Duke number 9. Obviously, Duke is Duke.
Duke's
Keith Gillen. They'll have Cam Boozer. Duke, that's a good thing. And then UCLA, he's got number 10. I might quibble with UCLA being number 10, but UCLA also kind of clinging on to some blue blood status. Preseason top 10, Mick Cronin was good for 7 viral moments at the microphone last year. He's got Arizona 11 and Kentucky 12. So even that, like if you expand out the top 10 and you go to the top 12, Arizona, big time hoop school, Tommy Lloyd, super smart. They've got some good dudes. And then he's got Kentucky 12. I swear I'm not saying this because I'm on the show with you, and I haven't really thought about it too deeply yet. I think on instinct, if you tell me Quaintance will be okay, with you bring back Oweh, I do like Jasper Johnson, Marino, and Malachi Marino as some
Jalen Lowe is the key.
Harrison takes a jump.
Lowe's the key. I know y'all don't. I know a lot of you guys don't like Lowe, but he's the key.
He is the key, and I just got to see what he's going to be. I think I would slot Kentucky 9 or 10 when we get to in October. Don't hold me to that. But I think the worst case, again, what a team is, what you think they'll be in October versus what they are in February, those can be very different things. I think objectively speaking, when you look at what Pope did in year 1, what Kentucky brings back, he's got him at 12. I think there's no excuse. Like 13, 14 is the worst, and I think your ceiling going in, I think you could probably justify as good as like 7 overall. It's really good stuff. Pope's done a really, really nice job, and it's been awesome to see. It's been awesome to see how he has really adapted to having this job, and we can go wherever you want, but just a quick comment on this. I'm sure you've talked about this plenty of times on your show over the past year plus. But Calipari, when he was hired at 2009, was the perfect guy at that job at the perfect time. And yes, it was a disappointment that in the grand scheme, you look back, one national title. That's a disappointment, no doubt about it. But he was the right guy with the right mindset to handle that job. And then for someone to replace him, Pope, what he has upstairs, how he's built, how he's wired, man, that was another one where I...
Well, it's perfect timing because he's completely different than Cal. But Cal was the perfect person at the time, and Pope was the perfect this time because Cal, in many ways, filled all the voids that the end of the Tubby era and Gillespie era had given us. He checked all the bad boxes, like he flipped them all. And then where Cal went off the rails, Pope flipped those. And I've told this story a lot on my regular show. I don't know if you know this story, but when I met Pope for the first time, like 4 months after he was hired, because I was out of the country for 3 months after he got hired. And when I met him, I was like, man, I have to tell you, if Cal had come back, I was probably going to quit And I said, you being here and me going away for a while. And then he started going in this long thing about how I needed to keep doing it. And he then said something like, he said, when I lose, I want you to blast me. If you don't blast me, I'm going to call and get mad at you, because the day the fans don't care anymore and the day the fans think the coach is above criticism, then this isn't Kentucky anymore. So he said, if you are ever soft on me, be ready. I'm going to ask you why. Now, we'll see if he really believes that one day, because I loved him this year and I'll probably continue to love him. But just that was exactly what Kentucky fans needed in that moment. And I think the fact that two completely different people made it work in two completely different ways, I think has been really cool to see.
I agree with you. And it's a bit easier to say this because now we're living in this reality, but you think about just to talk, Scott Drew, Dan Hurley, those guys turning it down. And that's not to say that if either of them had taken it, Dan Hurley was never taking the Kentucky job. Let's be clear about that. It was never happening. But either of them had taken it, that they could have had a success a year in, and we'd be talking about this is why this works, whatever. But man, there's just something about Pope. The fact that he played there, was on the 96 team, how he was wired. He was the captain. And he's even still got he's got something, like he even said, I saw him on the trail and he like jokingly was like, when they fire me in a year, I was like, dude, you gotta stop saying that. Like,
yeah,
you are doing a great, like he's got a self-deprecating nature about him, because I think a part of him doesn't believe he has a job. And then he also, he hasn't said this, but I remember Tony Bennett, I went to Tony Bennett's retirement press conference last October, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but Tony Bennett basically said, like, the job was never mine to begin with. I was just renting it in place, and now it's time to give it away. And that is 100% the way Pope sees this. Like he does not see it as it is his job. He is a placeholder for something that means a ton to people in that state that love that program so much. And he's the right guy for it. He really is. It will be interesting. There will be downtimes. There will be some tough stuff. I will be interested to see how he handles it. We saw a little bit of that last year one, but overall, big picture, like unquestionably a massive success.
Yeah. And he gets there's a part of this where for Kentucky fans, they want to win, but they also have this like family thing where they like a big blue nation, like where it just means different things to people here. And he gets that better than any coach that I've seen. Okay. So you and I had I don't want to say a disagreement, because as I said on my show today, if Matt Norlander said it, I know that he heard it, and so I'm not going to dispute him on that. But you had said that someone had told you on the trail that of the basically, $18 million that will be distributed between football and basketball at most schools are kind of putting 2.5 to the other sports, that you thought it could even be like 9 and 9 at Kentucky of football and basketball. So I tweeted out that you said that, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I haven't got to tell you this privately, but all of a sudden I kept hearing from everyone in the football world at UK. It wasn't the basketball. It wasn't the football world. Just all of a sudden, sometimes when people like you put stuff out and I retweet it, people act like I put it out and they get mad at me. And so they're writing me and they go, how could you say that? It's not that. It's not that. And then insisted that it was the opposite, and that they didn't give me a number, but essentially that it was competitive between UK and the other SEC schools in football. I found that interesting because it used to be that UK football would privately complain that there wasn't as much money going. So I don't know what the basis of that is, but I've explained on my show why I said it. The 9 and 9, talk about where you heard that and why.
So here's what I have. Okay, so I was on the trail, and I got it from two different sources. One source said Kentucky men's basketball should be getting close to half of the revenue share, which I understood to be $20.5 million, okay, of the overall $20.5 million. And then another source specifically gave me 45%. So I said, okay. So that's when I wrote.
Very specific.
I put the story it's very well. How about this? So that's two sources, and so I intentionally, when I wrote it, I was like, okay, I'm going to put this out there. Kentucky fans are going to see it, and like I know there'll probably be some reaction to it. But two good sources pass this along to me, and I wrote believed to be, not is, but believed to be. That's fair. That's two connected sources providing that. I then had two. So this is two for the story. Then you put out what you put out. That was like, hey, football, or I heard from sources that. To the degree which it was stated wasn't that level. Well, then I had another, how about this? I had another source, to be clear, in the industry, not at Kentucky, contacted someone with Kentucky, shared a screenshot with me that said, UK, I'm looking at the screenshot right now, from July 9th, by the way. UK next year will have a 45% go to basketball and 50% to football. That's a third source. And then a fourth source connected to Kentucky reinforced to me that the number was accurate, that it indeed, the plan, I'll stress this, the plan was for men's basketball for the forthcoming season to have a 45% rev share of the entire $20.5 million cap. Now, this is the other extremely important part of this discussion. Two parts actually. One, does Mitch Barnhart technically have the capacity in August, September, October, November to say it was 50% for football now, but actually this needs to go to 57% or 60%? Does he, will he? I don't know. And then number two, since my story came out, literally the CSC changed its guidelines to a point where so this could have even changed in the past 24 hours to this point. If that's going to actually be true, and football then needs to go from purportedly 50% to 60 to 70% in its budget, and then allows Kentucky basketball to basically make up the difference in NIL, that's an important factor as well. But as one source also told me, and we talked about, for Kentucky football, this I cannot speak to. I'm just passing it along. I can't speak to how valid this is or not. They basically were saying on some level, if Kentucky football is getting 50% of its NIL rev share cap, or it's getting 70%, does that 20% difference, does it actually make any kind of difference whatsoever in terms of what kind of football team Kentucky will field? If it's 70% or 50%, are you having the same exact team? And then this other source also put forth to me that Stoops, they're really turning the screws on him. And the situation was with Stoops 2-3 years ago. Again, I cannot speak to this. I'm just passing along what was told to me. The situation with Stoops 2-3 years ago versus what it is now, obviously not nearly as rosy. And so if you're trying to, it's a little bit like some other coaching situation we've seen where if you're on the brink and you want to make a decision, well, you might not make it as easy as possible to make that decision whether or not to move on easier. I'm sure he has a massive buyout, but I'm just passing along what was passed.
Yeah, well, okay. So now when you tell me you have four sources, I'm more inclined to believe you than what I heard. But
it would make sense, by the way, Matt, for football people to want to push back on this because you do not want to have it known in the SEC that Kentucky has the lowest amount of rev share in football.
What's weird to me about that, I totally agree with you, but what's weird to me about that, and this is I can just say to you because I have for 15 years taken phone calls from either basketball, football, or the ADs complaining about something I've said. Like that's been a regular part of my life going back to about 2008. So, but when the whole basketball, football school thing was going on, here, okay, that little Stoops Callier, both sides would want to contact me to make clear what was wrong with the other side. Okay, the basketball people were very adamant to criticize the football people, and the football people were very adamant to criticize the basketball people. And it would always be funny to me when I would see people online go, "Oh, this is not that big a deal," and I'd be like, "Yes, it is. You just have to come and listen to my phone calls." It has been very rare for the people on the football side to, if they think they're getting hosed, they say it, right? And so it was interesting to me that they didn't want to say that. Now, a lot of this is like we don't really know because we don't know how they make up the money in the other parts.
Correct.
Are these universities even going to have to tell us? Like, do you know? Like, are the universities going to ever have to say what they actually did?
Depends on how they run their systems. Kentucky taking some of its stuff independently as an athletic department?
But they told me that they would still release everything they would release.
I
think they should.
I think they should. And I just want to reemphasize this. As I understand it, I do think sometimes reporting can trigger other action. So if this was the intention for Kentucky, I still think if there's enough internal blowback or whatever, I still think there's a chance that the number actually winds up getting adjusted, especially after the rule changed.
I think that's a very important point, Matt. I want you to don't skip over that because you're a reporter. I'm not. Reporting can change action. Happens all the time. And sometimes it happens, and then people say the reporter was wrong, and you were actually right, and the reaction to your report got them to change the course. I think that happens a lot.
That sometimes can happen. But I would say this. If you're Kentucky, I know football still means a great deal, and you do not want to be in the basement of a 16-team SEC from a football standpoint. I completely get that whatsoever. But you have a really, really good head coach, and men's basketball from a talent acquisition standpoint, when individual players, with the exception of a quarterback, obviously, mean more in basketball, college basketball, than they do football. I understand that getting a great edge rusher, an amazing left tackle, a first-round draft pick as a wide receiver, but particularly a quarterback, I understand how much those things can mean in the portal. I'm just telling you, in terms of star players, from what I've gathered, this is 2-3 years worth of anecdotes and stories from coaches, agents, etc. The basketball market is more expensive than the football market. There's more money into football because the rosters are bigger. But if you want to maintain a competitive edge in Kentucky, as you well know, I don't believe Kentucky spent $20 million on its roster for this upcoming season. I would believe north of 15, 16. Maybe we're getting into semantics there. But
really, you think 15 or 16 million this year?
I would believe that if that was if you told me Kentucky, truly, if we could have a way to peek into the accounting, if we fast forwarded to say New Year's Day and said, collectively on Kentucky's men's basketball roster, how much has been allotted or will be allotted. If you told me that was in the range of 15 million, I would 100% believe that. And they would not be the only school to hit that number. Now, there has been, has there been like reports? I know the 20 million number has been associated with Kentucky.
It's been said out there. I don't know to what extent it's true.
That's an outrageous amount. Now, what I do think is possible, and I want to be very clear about this. This is now me speculating. This is not reporting. This is nothing anyone indicating to me. I do think it's possible that if Kentucky, before this rule changed, and they're not the only one, wanted to get ahead of it, because I reference a school in my story, but I don't identify which school, and it's not Kentucky, to be clear on this. If they wanted to front load all of their NIL money, which would have been the smart thing to do. So frankly, if Pope and his staff had the ability to do this, they should have done it. Front load everything
before July 1st.
What you basically do is you double your rev share cap allowance for the next year, and that basically puts you at a super advantage against most other schools. There might be a couple other schools that are in your neighborhood when it comes to that stuff. But bottom line is this. Kentucky needs to make sure that basketball is consistently the most important thing at its school, because it is the most important thing. And finding that balance between revenue distribution between the men's basketball program and the football program is Barnhart doesn't have an easy job. I get that. There's a lot of pressures with it, but don't allow Kentucky to enter into a situation where it's where North Carolina is right now.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, it was very briefly there.
Yeah.
With Billy Gillespie in different circumstances. There wasn't
going to be
sharing.
Here's a little
you
secret.
never want to go back to that place.
It was going to be there with Cal. Like that's where we were headed with Cal. They were not raising money. They were about to be there with Cal. I will say this to make you, I don't know if it feel better, but when your report came out that said 45% or whatever, most of the fan base said good. That was what most of the fan base. When I did a little thing on my show and I said, what should it be? And everyone said it should be what Norlander's reporting or more. I mean, it's fascinating how much this fan base likes when football is good. It's fun, but basketball has to be good. And I think that most people were hoping you were right, are right about that. So I guess we'll see. I guess we'll finish with this. You've been doing this. You were doing the Eye on College basketball since what, 08, you said? 09?
If we want to get really technical, not to go into the lore, I started before I went to CBS, I had a blog back in the day. Anyone listening or watching that remembers reading a College Hoops Journal. So I technically started the College Hoops Journal podcast in 2010. It might have been 09 actually, and that eventually morphed into Eye on College basketball in 2011.
So, yeah, that's when I was there, too. So I started KSR in 05, so we're hitting our 20th anniversary in September. It was a website at first. So give me Matt Norlander sits down, he writes his memoir. Give me your favorite moment covering games, or your favorite moment where you say, this was the best thing I saw during my time doing this.
Okay, first of all, no one's reading my memoir, but I appreciate that. Okay, since I got to CBS, the one thing that I'm happiest that I was there to, and there's been a lot, but being in the building to see Chris Jenkins hit the winner against Carolina in 2016, that's the only out and out true buzzer beater in NCAA tournament history. Wittenberg, Lorenzo Charles, NC State 83, kind of qualifies, but kind of doesn't. The shot was an air ball. Wittenberg dunked it, and then there was still time on the clock, but they didn't stop the clock after a made basket in 83. I'm getting into technicalities there. Jenkins would be there. Getting to cover Tony Bennett and Virginia winning the 2019 title, that's in my top 25 stories list. I think some folks don't quite remember how outrageous it was that Virginia won the title, because they had basically from the Elite Eight on, and even the Sweet 16 was a 4-point win over Oregon. But the Purdue game, Carson Edwards goes for 42 overtime. Mamadi Diakite hits the buzzer beater to get it to overtime. Then they escape against Auburn controversially in the Final Four, and then they have to rally to get to overtime in the title game against Texas Tech, and then they
weren't they even losing in their first round game again?
They were. Yeah, that's a great memory. I have one line in there. People forget that. So they lose to this. Obviously comes 1 year. Never seen a 16 beat a 1. UMBC destroys Virginia 74-54, 20-point win in 2018. It was just bizarre to wait forever for a 16 to beat a 1, and it was a blowout. That remains a weird thing. A year later, Virginia wins the title, but in the first round, Gardner-Webb, they were losing in the first half of that game too. Yes, that is a very good memory. So just being able to document that, I really got to know Tony Bennett well in the 2 or 3 years preceding that. Got to know his father well, interviewed his sister, his wife. So that was just it was cool to be able to, because Tony Bennett he remained closed off to a certain extent. He was just not someone that needed to have everyone know everything about his life. He wasn't, especially private, but he kind of let me in a little bit. So that was appreciated. There's been plenty, man. The Jenkins one is definitely number one.
So a couple that just stick out that I wondered you about, Duke Carolina playing in the Final Four was probably pretty
also
awesome.
Huge. I was also in the building, so that would be top 5. The Final Four one was huge, but I was in Cameron when Carolina beat Duke
on the final night. Game. Yeah, that's cool. I think for me personally, the John Wall team was amazingly fun, but I would think as an outsider watching the 2015 team try to go undefeated was that was a rare time in college basketball that the world of college basketball was following every game to kind of see if they were going to be able. And there was that game at LSU where they won at the end, and it was just like it was a storyline all season. And college basketball doesn't get that a lot, and they got it that year.
But as your fans listening know, and I was there, I really should try and sit down and do a top 10 of games I covered, because this game would be in the top 5. Notre Dame almost beat Kentucky.
Should have
in the Elite Eight.
Yeah,
it was an incredible game.
Amazing. Cleveland. Ashley Judd ended up on my post-game show dancing on a glass table in the lobby of a Cleveland hotel. It won't be as big a deal to you, but Kentucky Louisville in the Final Four, kind of like Duke Carolina, had had that sort of really bizarre bizarre situation. And then for us, the Aaron Harrison run of all those shots that he hit.
I know those were good. I mean, I've been at every Final Four to get to experience a lot of that, covering the COVID.
I was going to ask you, what was that one like?
Weird but good, but I don't think I'd want to do it again. You got to get tested every day, but it was I covered NCAA tournament games at Hinkle Fieldhouse. That's awesome. The situation with how they played in half of Lucas Oil. Suggs hits the 37-footer to get to the title game, and then Baylor, Gonzaga was the other team undefeated going into a national championship game in a COVID season. It's those were really fun, really cool things to cover. There's no shortage of stuff.
Zion. He's the biggest.
I did a thing earlier this year. I'm big on just wanting to document the and chronicle the things that matter in a given sport. And so earlier this year I did not the best players, the biggest stars. Two different things. Yes. Sometimes those things intersect. I don't think it's the most accomplished player of this century is Tyler Hansbrough at UNC. He has all these ACC records, 4-year player, 3-time first-team All-American, never lost at Cameron. He's the most decorated player. Zion Williamson was the biggest star,
without question.
Even at 1 year. There was no one. I guess the most basic way that I could put it is, and I just don't think this is arguable, in men's basketball, Caitlin Clark is the most famous college basketball player of the past 25 years. In men's, there was no one that was more famous while in college than Zion Williamson. He had presidents coming to his games, and he played for Duke. He had a megawatt smile. He looked different from anyone we'd ever seen. I got to cover, obviously, a lot of him in person as well. So he was big. I'll just a couple more that kind of stick out. Going into Manhattan to cover an FBI trial and covering the whole everything associated with that was, and that was a 2-year saga. That was extremely surreal. So that was a big one as well. But as we kind of put a button on this and go full circle, there's been so much that has happened to college basketball over the past 25 years that, creating a list of the top 25 in one story is just, it's not.
It's a great list. It's a great list. It's on CBSSports.com. Yeah, your Zion point, just as
you
a
would agree, right?
Oh, I would agree.
It's,
I would agree. It's sort of the argument like at Kentucky. If you were just to do Kentucky, two different questions. Best player of my lifetime, Anthony Davis. Biggest star, John Wall. Those are two different things. And John Wall is the biggest basketball star at Kentucky of my lifetime. He's probably the biggest Kentucky athlete of my lifetime. I mean, it's Rex Chapman and John Wall. There are rock stars in Kentucky basketball. Anthony Davis is great. Dan Issel is great. Rock stars, Rex Chapman and John Wall, and no one else is close.
How about that? Anthony Davis was just
not like John Wall.
To cover, and then
you remember you mentioned presidents coming. We had Jay-Z, LeBron, Magic, Drake. All those dudes came. Did they come to see Anthony Davis? They came to see John Wall. I mean, that's it.
Sure. And a lot of that, and obviously, Cal, as you well know, some of that was Cal's first year and everything just dovetailing there. And there are a few very interesting should have happened / what ifs. One of them is that Kentucky team didn't make the Final Four.
No.
Should have. They play West Virginia 10 times. They probably go 8-2. Yep. So that was like two of the 10 when they don't get the win. But yeah, what a time that was just to think about, man. It wasn't that long ago, but it does feel like,
feels like a different world. Very, very it was snowing in Syracuse during that game as well. Matt Norlander, great stuff. Thank you very much for doing this. CBSSports.com. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll do it again maybe during the season.
Hey, have a wonderful, wonderful summer. Appreciate you having me on, Matt.
You as well.